I'll wait. Excellent. Professor Cooper, the note I have says stick to 8 minutes, so I can try to do that, but is it okay if I go for 10 and then we'll still have a few minutes for questions? Yeah? Great, thank you. Okay, I'm setting my timer. Okay. Anyone who has attended or spent time around a Jewish preschool knows that it has developed for itself quite an extensive musical corpus. One of its greatest hits, which I will spare you all a musical rendition of, reads as follows. Hashem is here. Hashem is there. Hashem is truly everywhere. Up, up, down, down, right, left, all around. Here, there, everywhere. That's where he can be found. The song's longevity is immense and impressive. This is true not only in that I called my friend who teaches preschool at SAR, and she immediately reminded me of all the words since she sings it on a weekly basis, but it is also the case in that generations of Jewish adults have been saddled with an infantile theology that emerges from this song. The challenge is that I don't think God's perpetual and unconditional ubiquity is a possible or practicable theology in daily adult life. Moreover, I think it is actually an inaccurate representation of our tradition, and I find it to be a poor reflection of, at the very least, some parts of biblical theology. Some places are undeniably more godly than others, and some certainly much less so. Or in the language of the song, it seems unavoidable that Hashem is a bit more in some places than in others. A potential locus classicus of that more adult theology is in this week's Parsha, Vayetze. Yaakov's experience of God in this parsha is not boundless, but is intimately tied to his location. After falling asleep on a stone, dreaming of angels and God, and awaking the next morning, Yaakov proclaims, Yesh Hashem b'makom hazeh v'anochi lo yadati. There is Hashem in this place, and I'm using Hashem as a stand-in for the Tetragrammaton. There's Hashem in this place, and I did not know. Of course, it's worth specifying that if there is Hashem in a particular spot, then there must be other spots in which there is not Hashem. One might reasonably ask, if God appears in a forest and no one is there to witness it, is God really present? The Torah's claim, via Yaakov's exclamation, is an emphatic yes. Even if the experience of God is in some way subjective and individual, there is such a thing as objective Godness. Just because Yaakov was unaware does not reduce the metaphysical fact of God's enhanced presence in a specific place. It is a powerful moment of apparent theophany, but the pasuk that follows complicates our reading of this experience. Vayira vayomar ma norah hamakom hazeh, ein ze ki im beit Elokim. And he was fearful and he said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God. This pasuk creates for us a doublet. Having established that God is in this place, really that Hashem is in this place, why does Yaakov need to then say that it's the house of God? Is there a difference between those two ideas? What does the second term, Beit Elohim, add that we did not learn in the first, Yesh Hashem b'makom hazeh? Ibn Ezra seems untroubled by the potential redundancy, glossing each pasuk independently. For the former, he writes that it means there are places where miracles are seen. And he confesses he can't explain why, because that is a mystery. He seems to agree with the notion that certain locations are particularly prone to enhanced godliness. For the latter, for Beit Elokim, he says, Sheyit palel adam bo b'sha'at tzarcho v'tishma tfilato ki hamakom nivchar. It is a chosen place where a man in a time of need will pray and his prayers will be accepted. So he's aware that each term connotes something a little bit different, but given that they are placed consecutively, I think we need to dig a little bit deeper. Radak's commentary on the latter, on Beit Elokim, begins to elucidate for me the crucial distinction and the connection between the two. He has Yaakov saying, Lo ra'iti hamar ehazot ela kedei she'asino Beit Elokim. The only reason I was shown this was simply so that I would create a house of God here. The only reason that Yaakov experienced this vision was because he would then go on to create the house of God. It is not so much that a house of God is God's place, but that if something is the house of God, it ought to be God's place. Yaakov had to do something to turn it into a house of God. The term Beit Elokim is a statement, the term suggests that there's a statement of potential. Radak doesn't tie it to Yesh Hashem b'makom hazeh, but I think his gloss helps us understand it better. Because there is godliness here, it would be appropriate for us humans to fashion it into an intentional location of connection to God. I think there's a profound lesson here in how we interact with holiness. The fact that certain places are comprised of an elevated holiness might mean that what we do is independent of where holiness lies and that what we do doesn't actually affect holiness of a place. But no, I think it is davka empowering. There are certain places that are full of potential, for they call us to act in a way that turns them from mere sites of God's limited potential presence into full sites of relation with God and of God's worship. It is the realization that there is such a thing as a Beit Elokim that prompts Yaakov's subsequent vow. While we might be tempted, as Sarah and I were in our Charuta, and I imagine some of you were as well, to read the vow as chutzpahdik, we might instead view it as born of a genuine curiosity. After the experience of a localized theophany, Yaakov knows that God is present in a particular place. But will God be with him when he leaves that place? It's for this reason that the Bechor Shor says that the vow is phrased conditionally. He says, Kalomar, im ta'aseh li zot sheyish mereni ve'yeshiveni, az yihye li le'elokim. That's like saying, if you do this for me and keep me safe until I get back home, then you will be my God. Yaakov phrases it conditionally, according to the Bechor Shor. And I think he does this because he genuinely does not know the nature of God. If it turns out that God is the sort of deity whose involvement transcends location, then Yaakov will enter a relationship with God as a worshiper whose relationship also transcends location. I learned today in my dream, he says, that you are local, that there are certain spots where you are, and I will worship you there. But I don't yet know if there is you, im yesh Hashem b'chol makom, everywhere. If you are in other places as well, then there too will I celebrate your presence. Any theology is slightly more complicated than unmitigated omnipresence, opens the door to a plethora of questions, but also to a world of opportunity and personal empowerment. The world may be constructed such that there are places where we can say, Yesh Hashem, where there is inherently some amount of God. But that is purely potential. Whether or not we do anything with that, whether we allow that to influence human behavior, whether it can become an ongoing relational Beit Elokim on earth, all of that is in our hands. It was only after Yaakov experienced God and intentionally committed to an awareness of and relationship with God that a place that has God could become a dwelling place of God. I think we speak in support of Yaakov's theology of God's presence thrice daily. In Ashrei, we constantly say, Karov Hashem lechol korav. God is close to everyone who calls. Yes, God is perhaps always there. There is always the potential, Yesh Hashem. And it would seem that there are places where God's potential for being present is heightened. But we cannot know which places these will be or how such a place is determined. So even if God is present there or has the potential to be, Karov Hashem lechol korav, God will only be close if we actually call out. If, like Yaakov, we do the work to turn it into a Beit Elokim, into a place of God's worship. If we strive to turn a place that has some godliness into God's dwelling place. Thank you.